Thank you. We're now going to move to a piece of legislation because that will help us with our next question. So I'm going to invite Reverend Sangwon Do, the chair of the Connectional Table, to present that piece of legislation. It's found on page 15 in your pre-conference journal. Page 15.
Good afternoon. We are passing through the lunch time, so I'll make it short. I'm Reverend Sangwon Do, the lead pastor of the Calvary Korean UMC in East Brunswick and the chair of the G&J Connectional Table. At the January clergy session, Bishop Shore indicated that following the special General Conference, a team would be appointed to talk about how G&J would move forward based on the outcome of General Conference. We are a diverse conference, yet we work together well toward our common mission. We want to identify how in the midst of our theological diversity, we can work together toward our mission. We recognize that there is a pain throughout the church and here in G&J. And the pain will grow if we are not caring for each other. The team will work on the proposal by 2020 annual conference session to keep us moving toward our mission. Identify how in the midst of our theological differences we will care about and be in ministry with LGBTQ plus community. Strengthen our mission by assisting clergy and congregation leaders to lead in different contexts. Identify resources to assist our congregation during this time, and review and recommend how we will work with clergy, laity, and congregation that seek to find new affiliation to serve Christ, and to look at ways for how we will be one church under Jesus Christ and honor our differences. Bishop, I move for the approval of the proposed G&J Way Forward team.
All right. That is before you. It comes from the Connectional Table. Microphone number 2. Name and what you would like to discuss. That's okay.
Robin Mitchell, Stony Point First and Trinity Churches. I'd like to move an amendment by addition, page 15, and it would be, start on line 7. But I read the previous one to give context. Whereas there was strong support for the one church plan in the United States and G&J, and whereas we continue to be a part of the global United Methodist Church and not just a United States denomination, and whereas a significant minority of delegates were deprived of their right to participate in the proceedings of the special session of the General Conference, be it resolved that this team include in its work a search for ways to ensure their participation in the participation of our global delegates. And if I have a second, I'd like to speak to that.
All right, it's moved and seconded, yes?
In some of the rhetoric about the African brothers and sisters, I heard about a number of things that were done that were not appropriate. And if that's true, I agree with it. However, I've not heard too much said or complaints being made about the 30-plus delegates who weren't able to participate in the General Conference in the first place because of visa restrictions, and because we insist on always having General Conference in the United States rather than sharing it around the world. And I think it needs to be a action taken by the General Conference Commission with advocacy from their American brothers and sisters to put pressure on State Department or whoever the appropriate authorities are to get these people visas so they can come and exercise their right as members of the United Methodist Church. I speak with pain on this because by my calculation, and I know it's not accurate, there are at least 4.5 to 5 million United Methodists who are not United Methodists anymore because they have left the denomination through becoming autonomous churches, feeling like second-class citizens in this Methodist church, which I love. And that needs to be changed.
Okay.
And
Time is up. Thank you. That's a speech for. Is there a speech against? All right, we need a copy of the resolution or the amendment. If you could bring that forward. Is there anybody to speak against? All right, we're going to read the amendment so that we. Oh. I don't know. The secretary will determine whether he can read it or not. Okay, let's give it a whirl. Do you want him to read it? Would you rather? Go ahead.
Let me try, and you can correct me here. Whereas we continue to be a part of the global United Methodist Church and not just a United States denomination, and whereas a significant minority of the delegates were deprived of their right to participate in the proceedings of the special session of General Conference, be it resolved that this team include in its work a search for ways to ensure their participation, the participation of our global delegates. Is that it?
All right. That is before us. All right. All who would support signify by saying aye and raising your hand. All opposed by the same sign. It does not pass, but it is very important. I would like you to bring that to the annual conference session because that might be where it's more appropriate for us to share something as an annual conference. Very good. We're now back on the piece of legislation, microphone number 1, and then we're going to go to microphone number 4.
Question of clarification, Bishop.
Yes, questions in order. Name and church. You're fine. Go ahead.
Luana Cook Scott, clergy, Milford United Methodist Church. I have a printout. I'm using the printout of the pre-conference workbook that was emailed.
Yeah,
It
well,
has a different list.
Use the book that was given out today.
That's what I
not
want to
was
clarify, which
emailed to you.
list.
Yes,
It's the
that's
one that's
more
handed out
accurate.
today.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Bishop. Tom O'Hearn, lay member, St. Paul's and Brick. I'd like to move to amend the petition by addition.
Yes?
I move to amend the petition GNJ Way Forward Team by addition as follows. Amend at line 25 to add members of the delegation from our GNJ AC to the 2020 Northeast Jurisdictional Conference not already listed above.
All right. Is there a second? You would essentially be adding the delegation who get elected at our next annual conference session in May. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a second? All right, that's properly moved and seconded. That would add approximately 22 more people. Yes, you may speak to it.
We suspended the rules earlier and approved a resolution to help us, and I quote, elect general and jurisdictional conference delegates to represent us to develop policies for the church and elect new bishops. While I appreciate that the 16 people listed are our GNJ leaders, I only see one of the 16 who has represented us at a recent general or jurisdictional conference. If we want, as this resolution in line 16 says, to share our hopes and concerns with United Methodist sisters and brothers around the world, I believe the best way to do this is to have our general and jurisdictional conference delegates be a part of this GNJ Way Forward team.
All right, thank you. Is there a speech against? Microphone number 1.
I love our G&J family. This is Tom Lank, clergy from Haddonfield. I rise to speak against, not because I think it's a bad idea to add voices that are representative of who we are as a conference, but I think the bishop alluded to it. It would add 22 names to this. Imagine if we had added 22 more people to the Commission on a Way Forward, how much more difficult it would have made a conversation to happen. We also don't know, even though we encouraged it, that there's going to be diversity in the 2020 delegation that is elected. This slate really intentionally reflects the diversity of our conference, and I think we should stick with what's here.
All right, are you ready to vote on the amendment? Yes, microphone number 3.
With due respect to the previous Creed Pogue, Westside Millville,
And a speech.
each for the amendment.
Got it. Good,
Sorry.
thank you.
With respect to the previous speaker, the most important diversity at this point is a diversity of perspective. The bishop mentioned when we were telling the stories, there were a lot of stories from one perspective, not many stories from another perspective. I know most of the people on this list, and I'm sure I'll get to know the rest, and I have deep respect for all of them. But I think it's also very fair to say that there's already a majority perspective in one direction. This is going to be, we keep saying it, but it's really going to be the case this time, the most important general conference we've ever had. However, as an annual conference, we have a very limited set of options. We can try to figure out some way to disaffiliate. We can figure out how we're going to obey. We can simply say we're going to disobey while staying in. I think we all figure that's not sustainable. But otherwise, we're going back to the Commission on the Way Forward. There's only so many options. Allowing the people who are elected next month to be a part of that conversation actually only increases the table to the same number about that the Commission on the Way Forward had.
Please finish up.
And so I'm asking that we make that toward a diversity of opinion. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. We've had 2 speeches for and 1 against. I think you're ready to vote. Did you want to speak against? We'll take 1 more to speak against. Microphone number 4.
Linda Ross, clergy, Mays Landing. It's more of a question. Is the work of this committee to be presented at annual conference this May? And isn't that when we also vote on the delegates? How can they be part of this if the work is already done?
Right.
Is that correct?
That's a fair question. I don't think all of their work, they might have some things to report to this next annual conference session, but I don't think all of the work will be completed. Point of inquiry, yes. Microphone number 3.
Bishop, my reading of Creed Pogue, Westside Millville, page 15, line 9. To the annual conference session by or before the May 2020 annual conference session. It would not appear from, that's why I'm asking, as a clarification, that anything would actually be reported for this, for May.
All right. I'll let you ask the question. That's actually not a point of inquiry. That's a technical term, not to get too technical.
That's okay.
But the question is, if they wanted to report something to the 2019 annual conference, would they be able to? The answer to that is yes. All right. I think you're ready to vote. We're voting on the amendment. This would add the persons who will get elected at the 2019 session of annual conference, the delegation. All who would support signify by saying aye and raising your hand. All opposed by the same sign. It does not carry. We're back on our main motion. Are you ready to vote? Okay, we're going to go to microphone number 4, then we'll come to microphone number 2.
Hello, Bishop. This is Jessica Nolte. I'm the clergy from the Red Bank Church. I have what I hope will be a friendly amendment by deletion. On line 13 going into 14, I propose that we strike per paragraph 161G of the Book of Discipline, and be happy to speak to it if I have a second.
Is there a second? All right, it's moved and seconded.
Okay, great, thank you. So that whole line, the support congregations in different contexts to be in ministry with the LGBTQI plus community, that right there is an inclusive statement. So I speak as a pastor of such a congregation in ministry with the LGBTQI plus community. I can say that our ministry, our motivation for being in ministry with all people, especially with those who are pushed to the margins, comes from our biblical mandate to love our neighbors and to empower and equip all people to be in ministry and to answer God's call in their hearts and lives, making use of the spiritual gifts that God has made in them. The phrase per paragraph 161G points us to and possibly restricts us to this paragraph, which holds some of the most confusing and conflicting language within our Book of Discipline. In one breath, we are celebrating sexuality as God's good gift for all, but in the next, saying that this gift is only affirmed for some of God's children. Wouldn't it be more faithful for us to leave space for being in ministry according to Jesus' call to love our neighbors and our whole biblical teaching, not some of it, and not particularly what's just in paragraph 161G?
All right, thank you. That is a speech for the amendment that would strike everything after LGBTQ plus, I plus. Strike the words community per paragraph, or community, then after community, strike per paragraph 161 and following. All right, is there a speech against the amendment? All right, are you ready to vote? All who would support the striking of the words per paragraph 161G beyond signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. All opposed by the same sign. Wow, you never cease to surprise me. Okay, thank you. All right, it is all before us now. I think we should continue to move forward, but I do see a hand. And then we're going to go to microphone number 2. Dave? No, you're going to the right place. Don't listen to me. Dave Wiley, if you come to microphone number 2. I mean, Dave.
Sean Grant from Ballard United Methodist Church.
Yes, Sean.
I'm coming for page 15, line 16, number 3. I'd like to make changes to the language on that line.
You want to make an amendment? Go ahead. It's in order.
I'd like it to say, share our hopes and concerns with United Methodists around the world.
All right, that's moved and seconded. You want to speak to that?
I can speak to it. By using the language sisters and brothers, it puts limits on how we think about gender. So in the interest of including all, I like it to say United Methodists.
All right. That's a speech for the amendment, which would strike the words after United Methodists, sisters and brothers around the world. Are you ready to vote? All who would support signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. All opposed by the same sign. It carries. Microphone number 2. Dave Wiley's brother.
That's right. Thank you for the flattery. Appreciate that.
Name and church.
David Worley, Leonia United Methodist Church.
Thank you. I'm sorry I called you.
No, I
By the
am
good
honored.
Lord's name.
I'm honored. It happens all the time, actually, believe it or not.
Thank you,
I'd like to propose an amendment. It's on line 17. It would be point 4. It would simply read, abide by the book of discipline.
By the book of discipline.
Abide.
Abide. I'm sorry, say that again?
So it would be a 4th point. It would just simply read, abide by the book of discipline.
All right. Is there a second? All right. So we just took something out of the discipline, but now you want to put the whole book in. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, speak to that. That's
Well,
good.
it's a little broader, so maybe we, anyway. First of all, I'm honored to have been chosen to serve on this team after 48 years in this family. I think that Jesus has a way forward for us. Maybe we're doubting right now. Maybe some of us are upset. But if the Lord can feed thousands with a few loaves and a few fishes, he can certainly lead us into a hopeful future. But friends, listen, whatever plan or legislation this team brings forward for consideration by the annual conference, it really cannot afford to negate or contradict our book of discipline. If we adopt such a plan or legislation, all that needs to happen is for someone to stand and simply raise a question of law. The Judicial Council will then be forced to strike it based on the precedent of decisions 847 and 866 and rule against our work.
Okay. That's a speech for, we're going to take one speech against microphone. Point of order? Point of order may be in order. Try it. Oh. The point of order is this, and good lungs, thank you. The point of order is this. We must abide by the book of discipline, so we don't need the whole book of discipline in. I'm just going to say if that's not your intent, just strike it down, okay? So we're going to move to a vote. All who would support signify by saying aye and raising your hand. All opposed by the same sign. It does not carry. Now the whole matter is before us.
Amendment.
Microphone number 3, Creed Poe, Millville Church. Go ahead.
West side, there we go. Thank you, Bishop. It's always good if we can keep this light. It helps us
Yes,
go
yes.
along. To add after line, amendment by addition, to add after line 25. With full respect for paragraph 603.2 of the Book of Discipline, the Greater New Jersey Annual Conference respectfully requests that the presiding bishop give the strongest possible consideration to moving the 2020 annual conference to a date in June to provide some time for reflection and discernment after general conference. If I get a second, I'll speak to that.
All right, that's moved and seconded. Before us is to move our general conference date in 2020 to,
Well, to simply, that the conference would recommend to the presiding bishop to give the strongest possible consideration to it, knowing that there's already a date set, knowing there's probably already a contract. However, looking at what we were in 2016, where, granted, Minneapolis isn't as far as Portland, but still, it was in essence finishing the one and we're getting ready to start the other. And again, going back to 2020 is probably going to be seriously, the most important general conference we've ever had, giving us some time, leadership and otherwise, to reflect and discern as we're going forward, and also for this group, the Way Forward team, as composed, to bring a proposal in light of what has occurred. I was trying to figure a way to allow some time. If it can't happen, it can't happen. But that, at least we're saying, we're asking for that to be looked at. And that's
Okay.
all it's asking for.
thank you. That amendment is before us. Are you ready to vote? This would be to have me seriously consider moving the annual conference date, which would drive the whole staff crazy because we already have contracts. We might have to move to a different space and many other things. All who would support the amendment signify by saying aye and raising your hand. All opposed by the same sign. All right, it does not carry. I just want to say, if anybody's keeping track, the last 3 or 4 amendments we tried to amend here went down. So, are you ready to vote? Okay, good. All who would support the legislation found on page 15 signify by saying aye and raising your hand. All opposed by the same sign. It carries. Thank you. We greatly appreciate the work of our connectional table and your leadership. Let me share a couple of things with you. Number one, Sangwon Do will be the convener. He's moving from chair of connectional table to the cabinet, and he's the cabinet representative, and so he'll be the convener of that group. Also, Sean Callender Hogan has agreed to be the spiritual advisor for that group. So they will have somebody who will be the spiritual advisor, spiritual director for the group as they engage in these conversations. We're also working on probably 2 facilitators who will help to facilitate that conversation. Thank you very much. Appreciate you and the work that all of you are doing together.